Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea and the United States start preliminary training today ahead of next week's joint military drills. North Korea denounces the drills and says the decision to go ahead is a betrayal. South Korea approves the first Phase 3 trial of a locally developed coronavirus vaccine candidate. This vaccine developed by SK Bioscience. President Moon says the trial will have his administration's full support to make sure it goes smoothly. And the South Korean company Krafton, maker of the hit video game PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, goes public on the local stock market. But it's something of a bust. Shares down around 10% from the IPO price. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. New data show how people in Korea are opening up their wallets again a year into the pandemic. According to Statistics Korea, in the second quarter of this year, sales at department stores were up 20.3% from a year earlier when they had plunged in the early months of the pandemic as people stayed home. That was the biggest on-year increase for department store sales on record. At grocery stores, however, sales in the second quarter were down compared to a year earlier by 10.4%. That's because at the start of the pandemic, people had coronavirus relief payments that they spent on groceries and household necessities. The government has decided to extend cuts to local taxes levied by cities and provinces to help the economy recover from the pandemic. The decision was announced today by the Ministry of the Interior and Safety. These cuts in property taxes and acquisition tax will last for another 3 years, with an extra reduction of 10% for hospitals treating infectious diseases. Also, to help people buy homes in a market that's still overheated, the government is cutting taxes for 2 years for those buying their first homes. South Korea has seen a string of blockbuster IPOs on the local stock market recently. Going public today was the country's biggest game developer, Krafton, maker of the hit game PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, known to fans as PUBG. But day one was a disappointment for investors, shares closing about 10% off the IPO price. Paeunji has more.
On Tuesday, South Korea's biggest game developer Krafton, the firm behind the global hit PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, struggled on its market debut on the benchmark KOSPI. Last week, the company's IPO price was set at around 498,000 Korean won. But on the first day of trading, the stock opened at 448,500 won, or $390, which is around 10% lower than its IPO price. There were ups and downs during the day, but in the end, it closed at 454,000 won, or about $395.
Usually, on the first day of trading, stock trades at a higher price than the IPO price, but not all stocks open at a higher price. So even if it's a big IPO deal, it's important for retail investors to make sure that the IPO price is reasonable before investing.
Krafton's listing was expected to make one of the biggest ever splashes on the local bourse. However, analyst concerns about its overvaluation saw the game developer's IPO draw a lukewarm response from retail investors. During last week's two-day IPO subscription period, the firm raised deposits of around $4.35 billion. This was far smaller than other IPOs this year, such as SKI Technology, which raised $70 billion, and SK Bioscience, which pulled in $55.4 billion. That being said, Tuesday's stock price puts Krafton's market capitalization at nearly $19 billion, making it the 20th largest company in South Korea by market cap and the country's biggest game maker by market value. Krafton topped other large gaming companies such as NCSoft, which has a market cap of $15.7 billion, and Netmarbles, which is some $10 billion. Paeunji, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yo-jong Securities. Mr. Yu, good afternoon. Thank you for making time today.
Good afternoon.
Well, let's start with oil. The spread of the Delta variant is industry anticipating a drop in demand, and so oil prices have come down sharply from last month's peak to under $70 a barrel. Of course, that might not last long, but what do you see happening with oil prices?
Right. If you look at the oil price now, it went down as low as about $66 per barrel. The main reason for that is because of the rising Delta strain cases, and there's possibility of curves in the China, where the Chinese markets are basically showing some regulatory environment where the economy is slowing down. The PMI numbers are coming in at lower than expected, and overall, people are expecting that the slowdown of the recovery that we've seen in the strong first 6 months of this year. However, though, if you look at the overall the shift in terms of the inventories, it seems that the U.S. crude inventories are at the declining trend, and also economy seems to be continue to be doing resilient recovery. And we are seeing there is a continuation of improvement in terms of the travels and various other economic activities. However, though, yes, there is concern that the daily new virus cases have climbed up to 6-month high in U.S., with more than 100,000 infections reported nationwide, and people are having some doubts about what's happening to the overall economic conditions. In any case, we are not seeing a major increase in supply side yet, and therefore the supply and demand picture seems to be quite tight per se. Therefore, we don't think that oil price is going to plummet. It's just going to be remaining at a box range, which we've been saying that continuously. It should be somewhere between $65 to $75 per barrel. We don't think the oil price can rise up to the highest level that we've seen in 2018 level. Because of the continuation of the ample supply that we're seeing and the overall changes that we're seeing from the oil-based energy sources to a renewable energy sources, that seems to be having quite a big impact with the climate changes that we're seeing in global scale.
Right, and in the stock market in New York overnight, it closed lower. It seems that too linked to the Delta variant. Also eyes on what the Fed is going to do in view of that strong jobs report. What's the story in the global markets?
Right, on Monday, Dow fell about 107 points or 0.3%, but still remain at 35,000, well above. And S&P 500 declined very slightly by 0.1% and remains well above 4,400 levels. And also, if you look at NASDAQ, it was up by about 0.2%. It's at 14,860. Clearly, the Delta variant strain is causing cases for concern. However, though, we are seeing continuation of economy recovering. And if you look at the earnings numbers, it's coming in, now close to 90% of the earnings numbers that came in. And it all shows that the 87.6% beating the analyst estimations. And also there's news about the $1 trillion infrastructure bills that is expected to come to close. And if that's the case, then economic recovery should be in a right track. However, though, there is a concern about the tapering possibilities. Monetary stimulus that we've seen in so far is going to be probably scaling down as the inflation numbers are coming in strongly, with the labor market seems to be recovering quite nicely. If you look at the new job added, 943,000 added in July versus the expectation of 870,000, so well above. And unemployment ratio fell to 5.4% from 5.9%. And if this kind of trend continues, then full employment is expected within this year. If that's the case, then the Fed's tapering might be happening faster than expected, and that's the reason why people are concerned about the liquidity condition in the market. But however, though, if the economy is recovering in the right track, the earnings should be sustainable, and therefore the U.S. market might be taking some breather, but the trend should be continued to be in a rising trend.
Right, and Korean stocks today down a fair bit too. Many of the same issues, but a notable decline in bank stocks led by shares of Kakao Bank. Very strong retail buying today. Tell us about the domestic market.
Right. If you look at the KOSPI, it was down 0.5% plus, and KOSDAQ was down 0.75%. I think that Korea is reacting much more keenly to what's happening to the possible tapering issues and the global economic slowdown because Korea, number one, is highly linked to global economic recovery because export focused is important. And also Korea is highly sensitive to what happens to the U.S. dollars and U.S. interest rate. So those are the concerns that are affecting the KOSPI and the Korean market. On top of that, the current condition of a lot of the IPOs that are happening, we have seen quite significant size of IPO from Kakao Bank to the Krafton listing. And this kind of new listing would absorb the liquidity conditions that we've seen in the market, and that affects negatively for the overall market trend. So I think that currently all these new IPOs, second quarter we're looking at 27 new IPOs, first quarter was 32 new IPOs, and all these are absorbing quite a bit of ample liquidity that we're seeing in the market. However, though, the fundamentals of the current existing listed companies are looking very good with a strong earnings momentum. And if that's the case, we think that the market should show rising trend towards the end of this year. For the short term, because of the liquidity conditions and because of these some issues with the tapering, we think the market might take some breather for the time being.
And finally, Mr. Yu, if we could talk about yesterday's big news that Samsung Group's de facto leader, Yo-jong, who's in prison, has been granted parole, and that should make it easier for him to take part in decision-making for the company. Interestingly, that decision did not result in a surge for Samsung stock today. Why do you think that is, and what do you make of the situation overall?
Right. If you look at the current situation about Samsung is that there's always been the corporate governance issue relating to this group. And obviously that applies to all the group within the country. But Samsung has been making some headways to improve the corporate governance side where they have increased the payout ratios and the structural issues. And right now, as you know, the heavy competition is happening on the handset area as well as the DRAM area, the semiconductor businesses, and that Korea needs to do ample investment to continue to be the top market share players within the memory business side. So Jae-yong Lee coming back is positive news. However, though, because he was convicted before having participating into the management process, he needs approval. So we need that some time period. And we need to see continuation of improvement in the corporate governance side from the Samsung Group. I think that that's something that needs to be done over the longer term period rather than immediately thinking that this would have a positive implication for the share prices. We will watch and see how it plays out. But we think that the competitiveness of Samsung Electronics and Samsung Group is world scale, that within the handset business as well as the semiconductor businesses, we think that they will continue to have a very strong market share within this area. So overall, I think there's a lot of the political issues, the corporate governance issues, but I think the track is in the right track where improvement is happening for the Korean corporations.
Got it. All right, we'll have to leave it there for today, Mr. Yu. I always appreciate your insights. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
South Korea and the United States have started preliminary training ahead of their annual summertime military drills slated to begin next Monday. The drills are considered vital to maintaining combined readiness as well as creating the conditions for the envisioned transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The militaries of South Korea and the U.S. started their preliminary training for their annual summertime drill starting Tuesday. The drill, called the Crisis Management Staff Training, is aimed at preventing the expansion of conflict or terror into an outright war. This year, South Korean military sources say it's led by its Joint Chiefs of Staff for the course of 4 days. The actual military drills, called the Combined Command Post Training, or CCPT for short, will be carried out starting next Monday until August 26th. However, Seoul's defense ministry reiterated Tuesday that details regarding the exercise are still being discussed.
The South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises are being considered regarding various factors, including maintaining combined readiness amid the COVID-19 pandemic, fostering conditions conducive for the envisioned OPCON transfer, as well as supporting diplomatic efforts for the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula and establishment of everlasting peace. Currently, the combined drill's duration, volume, and method are being decided by the two countries.
The CCPT is made up of computer simulations and is led by the Combined Forces Command Commander, U.S. Army General Paula Camara, who took office last month. The militaries of South Korea and the U.S. plan to go public and provide details, including the volume and duration of their joint drill, to North Korea, as is customary, right before the actual drill starts next Monday. They'll highlight that the exercises are defensive in nature. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, North Korea is calling the decision by the Allies to go ahead with their joint exercises as an act of betrayal. That was what Kim Yo-jong, the sister of the regime's leader, said in a statement Tuesday on behalf of her brother. She said the U.S. is pretending to want dialogue while planning an invasion. Kim Dami has this report.
Seoul's Unification Ministry said Tuesday that the ministry will not presuppose anything about Pyongyang's latest criticism of the Seoul-Washington military drills and has pledged to prepare for all possibilities. The sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un earlier on Tuesday slammed Seoul and Washington for going ahead with their joint military exercises, expressing deep regret over South Korean authorities' a quote, act of betrayal. Speaking on behalf of her brother, Kim Yo-jong made the remarks in a statement issued by the regime state media on Tuesday as the allies launched their preliminary training in the run-up to next week's main summertime drills. In addition, calling the combined drills war exercises, Kim warned that they would further destabilize the regional peace and stability. Kim Yo-jong also brought up the regime's long demand that American troops leave South Korea and said their presence was a source of trouble. Tuesday's message was also harsh and hostile toward Washington. The statement claimed the U.S. call for unconditional dialogue is to hide its true intentions for invasion. It then said that Pyongyang will strengthen its national defense and strong preemptive capabilities to swiftly respond to any military act. Observers note that Kim's latest warning reiterates the North's firm opposition to any military drills, asking for bigger concessions of her progress in inter-Korean ties and Pyongyang-Washington relations. Despite Kim's harsh message, the two Koreas carried out their regular phone talks on Tuesday morning. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea today reported 1,540 new coronavirus cases. Those outside of the capital region account for almost 45% of them, and there are also some so-called breakthrough infections in people who've been vaccinated, though the authorities are emphasizing that they're very rare. Kim Hyun-sung reports.
South Korea reported 1,540 new COVID-19 infections on Tuesday. All but 64 cases were local transmissions. Local infections in the non-capital regions accounted for almost 45% of the local cases, with Gyeongsangnam-do Province and Busan seeing 110 cases and 105 cases respectively. On midnight Tuesday, Busan started implementing the highest level 4 social distancing measures. The measures will run until the 22nd of this month. Both Busan and the nearby Kimhae city saw clusters of breakthrough infections. They had outbreaks in care facilities roughly 6 weeks after 80% of their patients and staff have completed their vaccinations. The country has so far seen a total of 1,540 breakthrough infections and 2 deaths.
There's a 0.02% chance of a breakthrough infection. That's 2 in every 10,000 people. That's very low.
Health authorities have analyzed some 380 people who've had breakthrough infections and found 247 of them had a variant strain, and 221 of those were the Delta variant. Also, after analyzing a third of this past week's infections, health officials found out that more than 75% of cases have been variants, up 8% from the previous week. Almost 97% of the variant cases were Delta. Health authorities are still urging people to get vaccinated and say that the vaccines reduce the risk of serious illness and death in those who do get infected. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in says he will provide full support to ensure that domestic vaccine trials are carried out quickly and thoroughly. This comes as the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety today approved a Phase 3 clinical trial of a COVID-19 vaccine candidate developed by SK Bioscience. This vaccine is labeled GBP 510. It's one of two candidates from SK Bioscience, and it's the first domestically developed vaccine candidate to get the go-ahead for a final trial. President Moon has been emphasizing the importance of securing vaccine sovereignty, and the Blue House spokesperson said the president hopes South Korea is able to bring a domestic vaccine to the market. In a meeting with his top aides on Monday, Moon said that they will speed up the development of domestic vaccines and concentrate all state capacity into building a global hub so as not to be deterred by overseas firms. Time magazine has announced its list of the world's 100 greatest places to visit, and one of them was the South Korean city of Gyeongju. It's home to some of the country's greatest historical treasures. Right now, it's not easy to get there for international travelers, so our culture correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has the highlights in this report.
Historical gem and museum without walls. Once the capital of the ancient kingdom of Silla, the city of Gyeongju in Gyeongsangbuk-do province is full of well-preserved historical sites. This year, the UNESCO World Heritage Site has been chosen as one of the world's best places to visit by Time magazine, and these are the highlights from the open-air museum. The oldest astronomical observatory in Asia stands in the middle of Dongbu Historic Area, where lots of relics are still being excavated. Built during the 7th century, the observatory shows how scientifically advanced the Silla kingdom was.
On the slopes of Tuamsan Mountain lies the Pulguksa Temple, designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1995. The name Pulguksa means the land of Buddha, and all the relics and the architecture of these bridges attest to the flowering of Buddhist art and culture here.
Only enlightened people can walk up and down the Yeonhwa-gyo and Chilbo-gyo bridges, while the Cheongwon-gyo and Baegun-gyo bridges connect its word with Buddha's word above. The Tabotap and Seokgatap pagodas in front of the main hall show the high quality of stonework during the Silla period. And the tourist spot that has been growing in popularity recently is Yo-jong Bridge.
Originally built in the year 760, the Gyeongju Bridge was destroyed during the Joseon era, and only its pillars were left. From 2008, the bridge was completely rebuilt over the course of 10 years.
In the daylight, visitors can see the Silla Kingdom's architecture and construction technologies, but the bridge is more famous for its dazzling night view. The illuminated tancheong, the Korean traditional decorative coloring on wooden buildings, is reflected on the water, making it the perfect photo spot for visitors. Last but not least is the Donggung Palace and Wolji Pond. The pond and the palace were built on the order of King Munmu after he unified the three ancient kingdoms. The treasures of Gyeongju have been here for more than 1,000 years. Hopefully, one day soon, they can again welcome global travelers. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The Tokyo Olympics came to a close on Sunday, and it's notable that in these games there were Olympians of all ages. A 12-year-old won a medal in skateboarding, and a 66-year-old competed in the equestrian events. South Korea had several teenage stars as well. Lee Kyung-un reports.
Two ends of the spectrum. On one side was South Korean table tennis player Shin Yoo-bin, 17 years old. The other, Shelly Ni of Luxembourg, 41 years older than Shin. The 58-year-old has competed in 5 Olympics and is the oldest Olympic table tennis pro. The match ended with Shin's victory, but the veteran player said she feels younger than yesterday and will continue life's challenges. Table tennis wasn't the only sport to see a dramatic age gap. Skateboarding made its debut at Tokyo 2020, and in the women's street event, 13-year-old Momiji Nishiya won gold. Meanwhile, one participant in the men's event, Rune Glifberg, was 46. Old and young players also shined as a team. South Korea's golden archery team was made of big brother, 40-year-old Oh Jin-hyuk, the ace, 29-year-old Kim Woo-jin, and 17-year-old Kim Jae-deok, who made his first Olympics debut. After all, it was Kim who helped ease the big brother's tensions with his youthful spirit and iconic shouting.
The other members said the shouting of fighting helped them feel less nervous during the competition, so I think it was a good strategy for the team.
Athletes at Tokyo 2020 really did push the boundaries. The youngest competitor was Han Zaza, a 12-year-old table tennis player from Syria who is the youngest Olympian since 1992. Kokono Hiraki, who is a couple of months older than Zaza, became the youngest Olympic medalist in 85 years with her silver medal in the women's skateboarding park final. Meanwhile, Australian equestrian Mary Hanna, at the age of 66, participated in her 7th Games. And these athletes once again proved the Olympic spirit knows no age barrier. 이경은, 아리랑 뉴스.
And that'll bring us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.